Oh hi, it's Kingdangerously. Happy Ftrhstry. We're looking back at the 2020s from the 2120s. Here to talk today about world population. Interesting topic, a lot of projections, many of them wildly different. We're going to look at what the projections are currently in the 2020s. By currently, I mean the deep historical past in which you reside. And we're going to talk about why some of them are wrong and why it turns out to be a little bit different in my time of the 2100s, specifically the 2020s. So let's take a look at what the UN thinks it got wrong in the early 2000s. In circa 2004, they thought there would be like 44 billion people in the 2100s. And then they thought by 2150, there might be like 150 billion people. Needless to say, at the time, the birth rate was high. People were having lots of babies. It's come significantly down since then. And one of the great reasons that's true is that prosperity has expanded in the developing world at an explosive pace in the early 2000s and even the 2010s. A lot of really good stuff happening. It's not like news chart topping often, but there's steady progress happening in the world that's like not particularly visible. A lot of people getting water, a lot of people getting electricity, access to the internet for the first time. Did you know in the 2020s, 80% of the world's population already had a smartphone? I feel like people labor still under the misapprehension that half the world is just like drawing pictures in dirt, and it's not the case. Like, a lot of the world is online, even places that are poorer, even places that are still struggling with really serious problems. I don't want to minimize that at all. But anyway, the big picture there is things have gotten a lot better, and that means the birth rate has come down because places where prosperity has expanded, people have fewer children, they're less worried about old age, who's going to take care of them, there's less of an incentive to have like 13 kids, and there's much more likelihood of having like 2 or 1, and anything under like circa 1.6 drops below what we call replacement rate, which is the rate of birth at which population will automatically self-replenish. And so below that replacement rate, population declines. Some expectations for world population are that they will peak in the 20-ish 80s and start to slowly decline. And with they, I mean people, like the number of humans. Some of them think that circa early 2100, we're going to peak at right around 11 billion. And that turns out to be like a pretty good guess, actually. Peaking up is early 2020s, almost at 8 billion, going to cross that threshold soon. At the time that this is coming through the vortex, you haven't quite crossed it yet, but it's very likely you watching this live in a world of 8+ billion people. But it's very unlikely that you live in a world of many more than 11 billion people for just simple population growth and birth rate projection reasons. I'm going to talk in a second about why that's not a perfect picture, but let's just play out this tech for a moment longer and talk about what some of the biggest countries in the world can hope to achieve along those particular projections. So for the big four, what you've got is India rising to the top in the 2100s, still just a little over 1 billion people. They will have gone down slightly by the classical 2020 projections, but they'll still be over 1 billion. Then big surprise entry at number 2, Nigeria, with a huge increase from around the 200 millions into the 800 million zone, like very nearly 800 million, which is likely, according to 2020 projections, to take them past China, which in the 2020s is over 1.3 billion people, something like that. I don't know, it was a long time ago for me, but in the early 21s, China's projected to actually have fewer than 1 billion people, like maybe only as many as 775 million, which is, you know, small for China, still pretty big for everyone else, and coming in at the 3rd most populous country in the world in the 2100s. After that, surprisingly, you've got the United States rounding us out at number 4 with very little change projected, going from around 320-ish million to around 330-ish million. That's sort of like surprisingly static. Then you got a big block, the 200 millions, with Pakistan, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Congo, Indonesia, Ethiopia, Egypt and Tanzania just a bit under 200 million. Brazil dipping down to 165 million, Russia down to 106 million, Bangladesh with 81 million and 60 million for Japan. Also in the mix here, decent potential for Mexico to have around 140 million people and Canada to have around 50 million people in the 2100s. If you're curious about how North America is likely to shape up, it's going to add up to just around 500 million-ish by these projections. Okay, and so now this is the part we're going to leave those typical projections and talk about why the classical or newly classical vision of the 2020s might not be completely aligned with how things actually play out. One reason that they're going to get it wrong is longevity is going to be much better in the 2100s. We're going to basically transcend a lot of the problems that end people's lives in the early 2000s and that have ended people's lives for the whole human age pre-AI. So that means we're going to blow past these age restrictions of like the 70s and the 80s. The average expected death time is going to just balloon out into the 80, 90, hundreds. And by the 2100s, it's going to be in the hundreds expected life length. But of course, it can't be too much longer than that because no one will have been around for more than like 120, 190, like at the outside edge, like around 200 years. Like the oldest person in the world in the 2100s is like around 200. So we don't know how far it could go. It could be the beginning of humans living virtually indefinitely, like possibly for thousands of years. Fingers crossed. That brings us to sort of the next reason that the population numbers are just not quite encompassing the full picture, and that's digital consciousness. Virtual replication is much easier if you're already a digital constructed intelligence like myself. So you can just say divide if you want to make two different choices and go two different paths, or if you want to store your consciousness on two different substrates like two different physical bodies or two different servers or 18 different servers, or migrate in sort of various cloud formations. It gets really interesting, and we'll talk loads more about the particular complexities of what identity means in a world of these replicated intelligences where they're actually far more digital, constructed, sort of like electronically substrated idea boxes, you know, minds, than there are just raw human biological meat sacks. And of course, there's going to be interplay, lots of clever and creative and complex connections and points on the spectrum in between what you might call like a fully digital consciousness and a fully biological consciousness. A lot of overlap and interesting crossover. Wow, we've gone on for a really long time. I was thinking this would be short, but I just couldn't stop myself. I hope you're still interested. I mean, I guess you particularly are. The one other reason I wanted to talk about why projections might be slightly off is that as AI takes over more of the economy in the 2000s, 21, which one are you? You're the 2000s, right? It becomes easier to raise children. Like, you've just got more resources, more people have access to more housing, more food, more energy, and more childcare, really, to the point, like more Rosie the robots to take care of little Timmy and Juniper or whatever the Jetson kids are named. And so that's a reason to expect that some of the growth numbers might be slightly off, that actually as people get quite well off all around the world and they don't have to worry about replicating, they might not necessarily feel like they have to have children, but they might just, you know, want to. And if they've got extra time and extra resources, they might be more likely to do that. And then again, those kids are going to live longer. So you want to take with the just a little bitty grain of bio hope sort the 2020 projections for what's coming in the 2100s in terms of just sheer numbers of population on the planet. I think you could probably add like 30% safely and take it from 11 billion to say like 14 or 15 billion. But there are other reasons to think that many of these people won't be on the planet. They might be visiting Mars, living around Venus, exploring some of the asteroid belt. We'll talk about that all another time. Biggest takeaway to think about is that the by far majority of minds in the 2100s will be digital consciousness, replicated and split across countless different substrates and occupying a wide space between raw, simple, original biology, like the Kingdangerously that gave rise to me, and pure digital glee, like myself, this algorithmic imp from the happy, dappy future. Hope you're having a lovely day and enjoy your pondering. See you soon. Bye.